the decision making, and without the classic hierarchy. How is that even possible? And just before we went on here, after a conversation we had, I just checked, looking into the Danish system of law, and it more or less implies that obviously this is the case. Obviously, there is a boss that determines everything, and as an employee, you have the right to know who that is and so forth. So it's actually pretty deep down in our genes that, of course, it is like that. But then again, we realize that sometimes the hierarchy gets in the way, and we don't get helpful decisions. And if there is not a boss that decides for me, who does? But the claim is that, like in society, we have a constitution. There was a time where we had kings and other despots ruling over us, and they just told us what to do, and then that was it. But we don't do that, most of us, any longer. We have a society where there is a constitution that regulates how we agree and how we decide together, so that we can coexist. I'd like to just ask you, what is your experience? Again, there might be different opinions on this, but I'll just put in the chat. Let's see if I can find out where that hides when I share the screen. Okay, there it is. Here's the link, and if you click that link, you can either just talk, say what you want, or you can you can go to that link and to the input board and sorry. You can go to the input board, which is it's this one here, and type in some of your observations here. So what have you experienced that are important with decision making in the hierarchy, good or bad? Let's see if there are some opinions here, or speak them out loud if you don't want to type them, and Anna will try and capture them and write them as well. A lot of bottlenecks. People ask for approval too often. Decisions are taken in a vacuum. Inability to decide, everything is important. I'm not responsible if someone else makes a decision. That's a good point. I would certainly normally take a lot more relaxed attitude if time to action drags, personal agency missing, in-depth knowledge missing. Yeah. Great. Consensus is difficult to find here. Decisions are taken, but accountability lies elsewhere. Yeah, that's a nasty one. Time to action drags out. Great. We will we will copy all these input into the final PDF before we send it out. And if you think of anything more that we should remember to take up, then please still keep writing on it. There, we will get back to the main flow here. And Vibeke, do you want to take over the screen share? Or
and I like the asking for approval instead of just doing.
yeah.
Might be a reason for that.
Yes.
So you will share the.
Will you take over the share, or should I?
Oh,
just
no, you can just pass on.
Okay.
But you right now you're sharing. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm sharing. So I'll move a bit forward here. There's a final one here. Just so you know, if the boss says he wants your honest opinion, he's lying. That's of course also an experience. So the next thing to talk about is some of the consequences of the hierarchy. And we've already seen quite a lot of them. So maybe you're going to just repeat this than what's already been said.
Yes, and I'm going to start. Thank you, Kurt. And I'm going to start off with that often decisions are based on what we call green shifted information. I guess you all tried the game where you have to whisper a story through a lot of people's ears, and the story comes out different in the other end. And when that happens in real life, from there will be green shifting, and the information will sort of change positively. It will be a changing story, and why is that? And the reasons are often... Sorry, who's talking? Somebody's not muted, but afraid of conflict. And of course, when you come in and you have to tell about bad stuff happened doing the work, there are reasons why people are afraid, both of the conflict and the consequences. And of course, it's because when you bring in information that is not 100% positive, you will have questions about why did this happen, and what would you do to change it? And we do have a bias that we have this idea that we can change, we can deliver in time or something like that. We will be better at the end of the sprint or something like that. But it's very safe for people to deliver good news, and it feels good. And if it's good news, you don't have to take any responsibility to take action and actually change something. And just the change bit is really a human thing that we want to avoid. It leads often to severely delayed decisions. And as we also saw that you put up, you guys on the board, that decisions are often made elsewhere and made by what we call untouchables, people high in the top feel safe to do that. And then when it's late, you see this sudden burst of deciding a lot of things at once, at one time, without having time to actually bring it up in plenum, bring it up and to talk about it with the people who's actually going to do the job. And it passivates everyone else. And when it's then top down to people, we do see a lot of research made on that. People, or the employees, lose, of course, the engagement, and they lose the willingness to take initiative and responsibility. And if they do and bring something, they have to bring it upwards. And I myself have experienced often to see changes that could be very good to make, and you bring them upwards, and nothing happens. It dies on its way because it's extra work, or the person doesn't really know what it is, because he doesn't really know how the job is done. So then we have the fear thing. Here we are looking into the psychological safety bit. It's shocking how many places that it's still in another way, neck down, that you don't bring stuff out because you get overruled anyway or criticized. And you get this long-term plan from above people, what I call stick to the plan philosophy. We made a plan, we made it up front. This is what we're going to stick to, and if you do take another road, it's your responsibility, because then you didn't follow the plan. So what we saw, and in Denmark, it's certainly in the public sector seen, that you get this term called "it's not my table." So if you get something or hear something that is not directly in the plan that it's your job to do, you don't interfere, you don't react to it at all. So it's a passivity that is really killing the business. And we actually had a discussion on whether we could put this drawing up on the right here, but we think it's so good. But the top guy there, it's not evidently that he's a bad guy, but when you put all the orders down, the only thing you can see is the ship that happens down there, that you don't get what you want. And as you can see, I don't even need to read it out loud, but when they are looking up down the bottom, you can imagine what they can see, only the assholes on top. So that's what happens when it's based on fear, and when the passivity really hits the table. I was looking, and I fall over this from Statista. We see now, as an example, Twitter is the worst at the moment, I guess, where a new boss comes in and says now everyone has to work longer, more, and just have to follow more orders, that you start dismissing a lot of people, and then all the best leaves afterwards, because this is fear. And it's definitely based on fear, what Herr Musk is putting in at the moment at Twitter. And I don't want to call him a narcissist or a psychopath, but you do find these types at the top. And that's the kind of people that think it's good fun just to get it my way. Now I can just decide. I'm the one that owes the most anyway. And I and me on the people on the same level as me, we do the thinking and you just do the work, what you're told. And you should do what you do best. Could be coding, could be producing, whatever the real work is about. And if it's agile development work or so forth, he doesn't have to participate. That's something that goes on the bottom. But he prioritizes, he plans implementation and actions, and then he expects, or she expects just someone to do the work. The downside is that these top-down decisions are actually pretty hard to implement, because how do you convince people to actually do the job if you don't use any kind of force or fear? If it's not engagement-driven work, you're going to lose a lot on your way. The people that do the work, if they don't have the authority to make decisions and have to ask for permission or go to superiors, well, this neck-down, new kind of neck-down work is, in my opinion, it doesn't work anymore. People are changing, people know more, and knowledge that people have, as our friend Dave Snowden says, I guess most of you have heard that knowledge can only be volunteered. It can't be conscripted. So if you lose the engagement from people, you won't get the knowledge that they know. And this is definitely a problem when you go into more complex scenarios. It's only if one person is doing all or making all these decisions, there's biases and noise that you will have a lot of waste and lack of engagement with your people. So then you get to the blame factor, and I found this little one at the bottom, as some of you might see. Well, now it went wrong again, so now we're gonna find who to blame this time. And it's normally not the bird on the top of the rack that gets the blame. He definitely has to find someone else to pin it on. So new times, knowledge-based work is growing, and a lot of stuff that was complicated is now moving to complex areas where you do really need more people to look at what we are doing. Now I can't remember what's on the next slide, or Kurt, or is it?
Well, I think it's up back to me. Yeah.
Yes.
So
we're going to call for something new here, and
yeah. So that's what it's about. Of course, that we believe there is a different way of doing it. We in fact we need to find a different way of doing it, because the hierarchy is stifling our creativity, our ability to maneuver and so forth. So I won't read all of this, but just a few things here. You will get the slides afterwards, and we have a tendency to put too much text on. I know that, but then again, you have some references once you get it. But I just want to say that the hierarchy model, of course, seems very natural, because that's how history has been. It comes from the military and the feudal system. There was always someone above you, and it also comes from a time where people were illiterate. There were only very, very few who had knowledge. So therefore, it's really an old-fashioned model in many ways. But once we're dealing with complex matters, things change. We only have, each person only have fragmented knowledge, and we need different perspectives. And in order for people to speak up, we need to talk about something like respect. So we need to come up with a model that actually will work in complexity, the social aspects of who we are as human beings. And going back to where we started, and we can't just sit forever, because consensus, as you said yourselves, is very hard to have. We need to have something that operates reasonably fast and deal with real life, and not just what I call, or we call, the fluffy bunny scenarios, where sort of being romantic about that if we're just nice, it will happen. And so we want to propose this agile lean leadership framework, and I can speak for myself that it's been inspired by some of the Viking thing, where the Vikings, of course, were not thoroughly nice people, but they had a few things about a certain democracy among the free men, where there was a way of deciding. So that's, at least to some extent, is an inspiration. And I would also say, from our background, the co-op movement. So how do a lot of equals actually decide and coexist? So that's going to be our challenge, and I hope we can speed up so that we get to some of the practical details. And for now, I'll just move on and say, what is it we are proposing? How should we organize? The hierarchy, we are familiar with that. Commands go down, reports and deliverables go up. The hierarchy exists for compliance and predictability. It's always done. It's always been like that. It still is. So what can we do differently instead of the hierarchy? Our proposal is that and there's a lot of references we can give to that. General Stanley McChrystal or David Marquette, the submarine captain, and they all speak in the same terms here: a network of teams or circles. And we'll start with the customers. We will design our organization so that we have teams or circles that deal with these customers and serve them in an optimal way. And we have relations here, and we may have further circles or teams behind the scenes helping us deliver, not in the front line, but behind the scenes. And we delegate jobs between them, and we can even link in our suppliers. And of course, some of you may have realized that this is the value stream that we talk about from lean. So the core thing, this is the lean thinking, 70 years old, when Deming started introducing it in Japan. Focus on the customer first, build the value stream. That is the most important thing. And the way it's built is that there is like requests and delegations going to the right, and fulfillment and delivery to the left. It's a pull system. And in order to handle conflicts then, or different opinions, just we introduce resolution circles. So this is in a way a replacement for the hierarchy. Instead of saying, okay, the boss has to decide, if we disagree here in the what we call the primary circles in the value stream, we say, okay, let's all just get together, not all, but in this case here, we are using the Scrum model. Let the product owners or those responsible for the deliverables, let those people get together and make the decision on strategy. Let the people who do tactical stuff get together and make that cross-team based decision. And the same with operations, which in Scrum would be the Scrum Masters. Or sometimes we need a special group of talented people to work with, for example, the quality assurance across all teams. And we have people in each team that are skilled in this, and we put them together, say you meet once a week or so, and we call this a secondary circle. Or if some of you have come across the Spotify model, it's sometimes called guilds or chapters of guilds. So these are people with skill sets that are in different teams where they have comparable skill sets, and together they make decisions in some of these areas. And we also have something we call transient circle if we all of a sudden has to do a very fast moving decision totally out of what we planned for. But in this case, issues and ideas move up, resolution and delegation and investments move down. It's not that that decisions have disappeared magically. It's just another structure. The people who decide for all of us are the same who are also in the value stream. It's not a separate breed. It's not separated in an upstairs and downstairs. That's the fundamental idea. It's for serving the customer and always being able to improve. So how can this possibly happen? And what does it mean, make these decisions? We are now homing in on the practical aspects. First of all, it had to happen. We have to talk about Cynefin also tonight. And here's Dave Snowden and his Cynefin model about the different kind of problems or challenges we have in front of us. Are they clear, complicated, complex, or chaotic? And I just want to highlight that what we are used to in traditional management is mostly over in the clear obvious. It comes from production, where it's a system that basically decides. It's more or less administrative decision. It's management, not leadership. We also sometimes come across the chaos leadership, where a strong leader makes quick, intuitive decisions, like Rudy Giuliano during 9/11, where he come up on the rubble and more or less everybody respected him for taking charge. What happened afterwards was a different story, but at the time, the strong man can make decisions, and we also know about that, the hero kind of leader. So we may occasionally come across the expert or technocratic decisions we have to take in the complicated area, the area of the experts. Hospitals perhaps fall into that category, heavy engineering, things like that. But the thing is, today we have an awful lot that is complex. And how to make decision in complex is very, very different. And that's what we're homing in on. So this is for organizations who have a sizable amount of complex stuff to deal with. So how do we get people to engage and come forward? That's going to be the next thing we talk a little bit about. And I want to just tell a little story that I sort of moved me quite a lot. But I saw a documentary about the city of Acre, or Akko, as I think it's called locally in Israel, up at the very north. It is known to be a city where all ethnicities and religions have been able to coexist. And we saw actually with this guy, the old guy Yuri, with his easily recognizable beard, who runs a famous restaurant and hotel there. We saw that with him, and he was sort of praising the neighbors and how, and what he said was, respect is fundamental. If you have to coexist in an environment like this where people are very, very different, mutual respect is where they don't have to love me, he says. And probably some of my neighbors don't really like me, but they respect me and they treat me with respect. So I want to highlight that this is actually the starting point for civil collaboration. There's the unfortunate thing was that in 2021, his hotels and restaurants and another hotel called the Arabesque was actually destroyed by a mob. So that was very sad. However, the neighbors, Arab, Muslim, Christian, Druze, all kinds of people, even some groups we never heard of before, got together, collected money, helped them rebuild, although these were Orthodox Jews. So the point here is respect. And I would also like to just quote Colin Powell, the former Secretary of Defense in the US, first Black person to reach such a high position. He said, respect is earned by leaders through care, competence, honesty, sacrifice, personal courage, being an inspiration, and never being abusive. So we're into dangerous territory here, because this is ethical territory where, in order for this to work, we have to give up on being self-serving and say, well, actually, it's not about how much I can get out of it, but it's about how can I create something for others. So whenever you have a leadership role, you need to take that up. And I guess the claim is here that unless we're willing to make that sort of change and abolish our need for domination and our need for power, and then it won't happen. But respect is the key thing here. If we respect each other, we can have voice, we can raise our concerns. I would recommend you to read Amy Edmondson's book, The Fearless Organization. And she just posted today, and I quickly grabbed it and put it on here on LinkedIn, a diagram she has in the book where she says, why is it that silence often wins? Why don't we open our mouths? And that's because silence is easy. It serves myself. I have immediate gratification. I don't get punished by anybody or told off. And I'm absolutely sure nothing will happen to me. Whereas if I open my mouth, I run a risk, and it will take some time, and I'm not sure if it will be well received. Okay, in an organization, it is our job as leaders to secure that it will be well received. We've talked about this at length, and we won't repeat all of it again, because we need to get to the practical details so that you also get some practical things you could go home and start changing tomorrow. So moving on, the fundamental mode of operation. If you can work proactively and you have like a backlog of things that you need to do, you are in control of things to some extent, and you can use the plan, do, study, act cycle that Deming introduced. We plan the best we can, we do the best we can, we stop up, we study, see how did it go, and anything to learn, and then we act, we change things. That's the learning cycle. Now, if you have to react constantly to unfolding circumstances, because the world changes under your feet all the time, you have to be more event-driven. And there's a more tricky one that you might find helpful, and that's called the OODA loop from John Boyd. And again, I won't dive into it. If anybody wants to know more about it, we have plenty of material and things we can give to you. Fundamentally, John Boyd was a fighter pilot, and he thought of how fighter pilot reacted during conflict, but it ended up being a general model. What he says, if you operate all the time in unfolding circumstances, changing circumstances, you constantly observe, see what's going on out there, you orient, you map it to everything you know, more or less intuitively, who you are, your experiences. And sometimes you can make implicit guidance and control and just decide on the spot intuitively. And sometimes you have to go through a more structured process of decide and action. So observe, orient, decide, and act. The reason I bring this one up is because this is the inspiration for the process that I'm going to talk to you about in a moment, about how can these decisions be made if it's not the boss making them. Now it's very easy to say, okay, it's just the boss making them. In the end, it's the top boss making them, right? That's easy. Everybody who's tried to get to a more democratic, I fear using that word really, but a more involved decision making, we have to have some processes in place. Dave Snowden, that we saw before, he says about the complex domain, you have to have enabling constraints. You have to agree on some constraints. We know back in Summer of Love, 67 in San Francisco, that no constraints is not a blessing. It always ends up in something nasty. In the 70s, the hippies movement did. Everything that has tried to abandon any constraints goes haywire. We have to have enabling constraints that we agree to stay within those limits in order to collaborate and be together. Just like in Acre with Muslims, Jews, and Christians, and Druze, and what have you. So what are these constraints? Those are the ones we have to define. And but we think in terms of this way of operating. Okay, so now we get to the meat here. What is the decision framework? Here's again our drawing of the network. First of all, let's imagine this strategy resolution meeting, the blue circle up at the top. So all the product owners now got together, like little CEOs in their own little teams, and now they get together and they have to agree on things, decide things. They agree on a time box, how long was spent. What's the decision process? How will we decide? Who is the chair if we end up in a deadlock? Who's the facilitator to make sure that we follow the process? And whenever we prepare for one of these meetings, we want to think about, is there anything that prevents us from making decisions? Do we miss somebody that absolutely has to be here? Or is there something that should have been done but hasn't been done? These are just checklists process. So we move on now. So here's a proposal for the process, which we call sustainable team workflow. First of all, we more or less with like the OODA loop, we quickly take all the input we have. We observe, orient, and react. We see all the stuff that is coming to us that we have to do something about. And some of it may end on our team tactical backlog, our personal backlogs, or we may move or delegate it to other people, push it aside and say we can't do anything about it right now, archive it, or later, next month, we'll look at it, or maybe we even discard it. This is irrelevant. But we run in this, what we call the OOR loop, a quick time boxed loop of taking in, being very reactive. And then after a while, we change to the next loop, what we call the Q loop, concentrated, uninterrupted effort. So now we work with the backlog of what we have, and we prioritize.
Can you point with your mouse where you are in the?
Okay, yeah. So we start with the first, where we observe, orient, and react. We take in input, everything that has come to us. We decide what to do with all these items, and they can go on different places. Then we switch gears and we go into the second half of the meeting, which is the concentrated, uninterrupted effort. And we simply work through the items on the backlog. And then we we sort of wind down by reflecting and reviewing. So how did this go? What can we do better next time? So that's sort of a flow chart for how you could conduct such a meeting. What we're saying here is not that you absolutely have to do it this way, but it's a starting point so you can find your way and get into a learning loop. That's the most important thing. And so if we zoom in on the Q loop, what do we actually do here? Before we begin that, we prioritize, we start processing. First of all, here's an item. We grab one item. We try to focus on getting common understanding between the parties that are around the table. Look for alternative framing, root causes, biases, and noise that could prevent us from understanding. But we try to improve our common understanding. Then we trawl for solutions or decisions that could be a resolution to whatever we have here on our hands. And then we ask ourselves, in all this discussion, did we change our views? Was it a different question, really, when we got to the bottom of it? We allow ourselves the luxury of getting smarter here. And then we move on to, can we decide? Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. You need extra things. You may have discovered you need an experiment or an analysis before you can decide. You can't do it now, but sometimes we can, and maybe we can mark it done. I'm going through this rather fast, and of course, if you're interested, have a look at the slides here and dive into the detail and see if you agree with making sense. And then what do we do with it? We do it right now in this meeting, or one of us takes it home and does it. Take it on my team's backlog. We figure out it was actually another team that should do this job, or so we either delegate or we move to it. And remember to reserve a few minutes at the end for reflection. So how do you decide then? There was a little conspicuous box in there, make a decision. There are lots of ways of making decisions. We would like to suggest start with these two. One is called consultative decision making. And that means the group agrees on who is the sharpest tool in the shed. Now, where we are in this forum here, if we get a subject in our meeting here and it has anything to do with snow and skis, it's going to be Christian who will make decisions there. He's from Norway. I mean, he knows about snow and skiing and so on. So he's the sharpest tool in the shed on this subject. However, if he accepts the responsibility, it is also his responsibility to make sure that he has spoken to everybody else that might have an interest in this. We give him the authority, but he assumes the responsibility of consultative decision making. And this is one way of doing it. So this is fairly expert driven. And so Christian will take this decision onto himself and go away and figure it out and come back and tell us what he did. And then there's another one. And I suggest you only start with these two and then start iterating and improving your process. Consent-based decision making. And that is really where we say, no, all of us have to be involved. These are typically the complex ones. I have my little set of pieces of the puzzle. Christian has his, Vibeke hers, Anna hers. But if we sit together around the table, maybe we can make sense of it. And we try to reach for a decision that everybody can accept and support. We can't make a decision that people are outright against, unwilling to back up, or wanting to undermine it afterwards. So when we make this decision, we should agree on we will not undermine it. The facilitator governs it, everyone submits to the process. We invite people for observations and orientations, and they declare their position. Well, I think we should do this, and you think something else. And okay, you can then try to use, we'll look at it in a moment, fist to five for decision making, for signaling, what do I think about this, or decision cards or other means. Those who have the most positive and the most negative views defend their case, like estimation poker in a way. try to get the extremes and argue the case. Others may have something to say. Try to declare the position again, see if that changed something. Did we reach something that was workable, where everybody could, if not like it, at least back it up? If there is a deadlock, and it will eventually happen in real life, we can't agree, the chair has the ability to break the deadlock. Okay, and then, all right, then we fall back to someone actually giving orders, but we can't stand still. That's sort of, we cannot not decide. So in the end, a deadlock, the chair can break it by declaring an emergency, list a possible solution, say to people, I'll go and get a cup of coffee. And when I've got it and come back, if you haven't decided, unfortunately, I have to make the decision so that we move. We can't stand still. So that would be the second. So think about these two ways of making these decisions. I want to highlight one thing that this process helps with is to battle all the cognitive biases that we suffer from. Daniel Kahneman has written extensively, he's a Nobel Prize winner, written extensively about that. And I won't go through all these, but here are a set of biases that he says are the most important ones that you need to attend to. And working this way that we've just described with multiple people trying to balance each other's views is in fact also helping us resist some of those biases. Some of the biases that are really dangerous are substitution bias, that we get a difficult question, but what we very easily can do is to simply replace it with a simpler one and believe we've answered the difficult one. And that won't happen if we're together several people. We will be called out. And in fact, Kahneman says that the mother of all biases is this one: what you see is all there is. All of us have a tendency to think that what we see is all there is to see. But being together with other people balances that extreme view, and we are less prone to. So just giving you some practical tools now that you can think of to use in these contexts here. For example, we found it very helpful to use this variation of the lean canvas. If you have a challenge, try and work this canvas through together. First, start with number one, out and to the left and the right. What is the problem really? Maybe draw a picture. Who cares about it? Who are the stakeholders here? Who is really affected by it? And the little note, the gray note at the bottom, that try to think about those who actually like that the problem exists. There are maybe people who like this problem to keep on existing. And then move forward, frame it differently. Make a call on the complexity. Where are we? Is this clear, obvious, complicated, complex? How could a solution look? Come up with up to three ideas, assumptions, and tests. Is there a cause behind the problem? Could you change the formulation of it? It's actually taken from Griffith University, where they have this in one of their courses there, and so we can't claim to have invented it. Before we talked about this voting, fist to five. You can find that on the internet, where hand signals can be used. Sometimes we find it more helpful to use cards that people can show in an online meeting, perhaps. I was told just that maybe this is not a good idea to have these cards because it sounds good, thumbs up, in some cultures actually is a rather rude sign, like our use of the middle finger. So okay, careful with hand signs. They may mean something different in your context. And one here also that I'd just like to point out, that Kahneman promotes, and we have them in our estimation card stack, we have also confidence estimation. And what he says is, once you've about to reach a conclusion, close the discussion, just try to ask people, how confident are you that we've covered all the aspects here? And of course, most people will be confident, but occasionally you will get someone who pulls a 20 or a 5, and you find an outlier, and you sort of save yourself the trouble of entering into a fairly important disaster. So double check the confidence. And we're almost done now, because this part, I think we will just try a short feedback here, see if anybody has something to say. Is there anything of this you could benefit from tomorrow that you could introduce? There is always 50% that you can do, although you say, oh, no, my organization is so terrible, I can't do anything, I'm not allowed to move, I'm not allowed. There is always there's always something you can do. So just a challenge. Is there anything you can do? The 15% comes from a book that's called Liberating Structures. There's a lot of good stuff in there. And let's hear. What do you think? Anything you can do, or of these things that we just went through? Any comments?
We are so many people that I can't see you all, so just speak up. You don't need to get allowed to.
So we have this. Okay, we need to move fast. We need to decide fast. On the other hand, rash decisions are the worst enemy of reasoned decisions. So if you just do it too fast, you end up relying on your biases and your prejudice. So there is absolutely no simple answer here. It is a constant balance, where only when we are together and we support each other can we get to the right point. Daniel Kahneman, he says, true intuitive expertise of being able to make fast decisions can be learned from prolonged experience with good feedback on mistakes. You can't be a chess master overnight. You have to play, I can't remember whether it's 5,000 games or something, before you can walk by a chess game on the sidewalk and say, okay, checkmate in four moves. Doesn't happen overnight. And as a 90-year-old, when he was interviewed, people said, Mr. Kahneman, as an older man, do you have any advice for the younger generations? And he said, yes, I wish they would slow down a bit and take time to invoke what he calls system 2, the reasoned thinking, and not just the quick reaction. John Boyd, the fighter pilot, said you have to be able to operate your OODA loop faster. The faster you can go, the more chance of success. If you're in an unfolding circumstances, the faster you can spin your wheel and react. So therefore, you cannot end up being bureaucratic. That will kill you. Amy Edmondson says, give people voice, create psychological safety. Then they will tell you what they observe. Then they will come with their ideas. And Snowden says, understand, make sense of the present, involve multiple perspectives, and look for the evolutionary potential in the present. So with that, we are almost done. There's just a slide, and then I think Anne will sort of wind the session down. This is just a list of things you can have an extra look at.
And thank you for the comments in the comments box. I suggest everyone to look at the comments, because there are good points there.
And, there's no way out. Oh, look at that.
Yeah, and Martha Svensson, if you need a few tips for your meeting, give us a call.
So Anna.
Yes, so this is the same you saw in the beginning, that we are all from Agile Lean House, and we offer courses and assistance, coaching, and we make tools. So this is our course catalog, as a number of one-day courses that you can combine in different ways, depending on what you want to learn more about. And the final slide, I think, is of our tools. Now, Kurt mentioned that we have this, our smallest tool is we sell estimation poker cards with some added things that you can, some of the things that have been mentioned today. And we have 2 software tools. One is a workflow tool for teams and product owners to help make the right decisions and view complex works in its context so that you can decide on what is most important to do first. And we have Cool Estimation, which is it's a little bit like Agile Cards, just online, and you can keep track of the discussions and votes that you've done. And we also, it can be used for estimating effort, also value and complexity. And this is a Gamba that you see here. And we have free trials of both systems. So thank you for, oh yes, this one we need, of course, to say this will be announced shortly later this week. This is our next upcoming webinar about turning feedback into real customer value. So feel very welcome to join that. And 2 minutes passed, but this is the end of the official program. If you have any questions or comments, you're welcome to hang around. But thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and thank you, Anne.
Thanks everyone. Yeah.